Okay, so according to the internet, families should not be living in condos. So, welcome to episode number 29 of the Under the Radar Real Estate Podcast. And in this episode, we are going to touch on families living in condos. So, I recently just posted a video about why families should consider condos as a family home. And it got a lot of interesting comments and responses, and I get it. Condo life isn't for everyone. But in that, one thing I want to bring up here is a recent podcast and article from the Missing Middle Initiative. If you haven't given them a follow, excellent real estate, housing related. This article right here from Craft Dinner to Condos, The Great Shrinkage, where it talks about the shrinking size of the average condo. So before we get into that, if you're watching this, you can skip over to that if you just want to watch that portion. So enough of the chat. Let's dive right into the market watch. So stats just dropped today. Again, October 3rd. These are the stats from September. Not a lot of surprises here. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen some of the numbers already, so I'm not going to go too deep into all the numbers. I mean, you can see them on the screen. Most of you can read. The numbers that stood out to me, though, were sales up almost double digits. We're looking at 8.5% increase in sales, which is not surprising. Anyone who's been looking for real estate in the past month, you've probably noticed a lot more buyers, a lot more showings, a lot more showing activity happening. And that's actually reflected. I'm going to jump over here to, these are our showing stats. So you'll see here in Toronto, when we look at showings, in the city of Toronto, showings are up 20% year over year, which is a really big number. So a lot of buyers have re-entered the market. So it's not surprising that sales are also up. The core West neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that I typically trade in. So let's kind of say like Leslieville over to Etobicoke, south of Lawrence, we saw showings up 25% year over year, which is a big jump in showing activity. So if we head back over to the market watch, not surprising to see that sales are up 8.5% year over year as an average. The only other thing with that is that, you'll see prices are down 4.7%. Also not a shocker, especially when we look at the amount of active and new listings, right? So new listings are up almost 4% and active listings are up almost 20% at 19%. So with that much inventory, there's the supply demand just doesn't necessarily work for sellers. So we're still very firmly in a buyer's market when we look at those numbers. Which then leads me to jump right on over to the under the radar stats that I like to track on this channel, which is SNLR trend. Let me get to the Toronto ones. SNLR highlighted right here, and the months of inventory trend. So these are statistics that give us an idea of, they're leading statistics, give us an idea of where the market's likely heading as we move further into this fall. For the SNLR, it's sales to new listings ratio. So think of that ratio as, in a given month, how many sales we had versus the amount of new inventory that hit the market. So very easy to say that balance is about 50%. So if 50% of the houses that hit the market sold, we're in a balanced market. Right now for the city of Toronto, that's sitting at about 35%. So only 35% of all those new listings that are hitting the market are selling. Now, that's not the story for the entire city of Toronto. When we look at some neighborhoods, some of the core West neighborhoods that I was talking about just earlier, WO2 and WO3 right here, we're seeing numbers above 40%, so 44 and 42%. So where are those neighborhoods? Let me show you the map right here. So let me zoom in. So WO2 is kind of Bloor West and the Junction. And then WO3 is literally just north of that. So we're talking like St. Clair West, we're talking Fairbank, we're talking Rockcliffe Smythe, a little bit of Mount Dennis. So a lot of the under the radar neighborhoods that we talk about all the time on this channel. A little bit of Oakwood Village kind of straddling that WO3. So WO3 and WO2, more in balanced market territory when we look at those two neighborhoods. So an outlier versus the overall average in the city of Toronto. And I'll get more into that in 1 second. Let's look at some of the other numbers for the sales to new listings ratio. If you look over into the East End, so E01 and E02 and even E03, so these are neighborhoods very close to the core. Again, if we look over here on the Treb map, so we're talking like areas like Leslieville, the Beach, East York, right? Upper Beach. These areas right here are also seeing more balanced markets. So we're not necessarily in that strong buyer's market that we're seeing overall in the city of Toronto. And then when we look at the months of inventory stats, for months of inventory, think of that stat as if there were not another listing to hit the market, how long would it take for the market to sell off all that inventory? So in this, generally a balanced market is about 2.5 to 3 months of inventory to say we're balanced. Right now we're sitting at almost 5 months of inventory. So it would take 5 months to sell off all of the inventory in Toronto. So if we look at the same numbers from the same neighborhoods we just talked about with sales new listings, they show the same thing, right? So W02, which is Bloor West, and the Junction, 2.7, so it's pretty much balanced market territory. W03, slight buyer's market at 3.3 months, but it's still fairly tight, right? So we're not seeing the strong buyer's market that we were seeing in the overall average in the city of Toronto. And then when we look kind of across the board, one interesting thing to note, if we look through the central neighborhoods, and maybe at some point I'll try and do some calculations, use my AI friends at ChatGPT to help me dissect some of this data. Because when we look at the sales to new listings ratio for the central neighborhoods, as long as months of inventory, they show and they're pointing towards a very strong buyer's market. But I feel that a lot of those numbers are skewed by the amount of condos. So in a lot of the more central neighborhoods, kind of straddling Yonge Street from the lake all the way up to Lawrence, there's a lot of condos. So I have a feeling that the condos are kind of pushing those numbers very much into strong buyers territory, because I'll tell you right now, in some of the neighborhoods I trade in quite a bit, and we look at CO3 is one of the key neighborhoods that I trade in quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, they're close to 40% and 4 months of inventory. And I bet you if you backed out condos, you'd probably see that more in balanced market territory. And then when we go to the East End, months of inventory is below 2.5 in a lot of those neighborhoods that are kind of close to the core. So we're actually looking, those neighborhoods are trending towards seller's market territory. If those numbers dip below 2, then that's a strong signal that sellers are now in the driver's seat. And a lot of that's just due to supply and demand. There's not a lot of condos in those neighborhoods, not a lot of houses, and those are neighborhoods that people are clearly desiring to live in, understandably so. So there's a lot more competition. So if you're looking in the East End, kind of west of Scarborough, things are tighter and there's a lot more competition. So don't let the overall headlines dictate, if you're a buyer out there, that you have to kind of look under the radar a bit, and you have to delve into the stats and look to see where the sub-markets are trading, because not all markets are the same. And the numbers clearly show that. Okay. Oh, one last little thing on the stats. I would like to go down and look at the month-to-month stats, just to kind of see where we're at in the year. Let me zoom in here. All right. So monthly stats for 2025 from January to now September. We started off the year at 1,041,000, and now we're sitting at 1,059,000. So when we look at the year as a whole, numbers are actually up as we head into the fall market, and they've jumped about, almost 40 grand month to month from August to September. Not a big surprise. We went from a slower month to a busier month, and we're seeing numbers start to trickle up. So as we move into 2026, it'll be interesting to see those year-over-year numbers and where we stand. Just a little note. Okay, that about does it for the overall stats in the city of Toronto. Next thing I just want to touch on really quickly are those under-the-radar neighborhoods that I quickly briefly touched on when we were looking at the under-the-radar stats. Let's look at the average prices in some of the under-the-radar neighborhoods that I like to target on this channel. And why do I target that? Like I said in the hop, this channel, we're really focused on having families live in the city. And a lot of the refrains that you'd hear, whether it be in the news, sorry, I just need some water. Whether it be in the news or just from people anecdotally, once people have kids, they tend to want to look for more space in the suburbs, because the idea is the city feels expensive, and the city is expensive, but there are some neighborhoods where families can still buy a house, buy a townhouse, or a large family-sized condo here in the city, and they can live a very comfortable life right here in the city where they're close to all the great amenities that make this city what it is. Okay, so with that, the under the radar neighborhoods are the neighborhoods that I've identified where it's still possible for a lot of families to be able to buy real estate here in the city. I already talked about a couple of the neighborhoods already. So the ones that we focus on this channel, so W03 and W04, if we go back over here to the map, W03 is that St. Clair West that St. Clair West neighborhood over into Rockcliffe Smythe. W04 is kind of that Weston, Mount Dennis, Briar Hill, some of those neighborhoods just north of that pocket. So if we look at the overall averages in these neighborhoods, so if we look at a detached house, the average in the city of Toronto is almost 1.5 million as of right now. When we look at W03, for example, which is, again, that number, St. Clair West, Rockcliffe Smythe, Fairbank, a couple of those neighborhoods that you hear me talk about all the time on this channel, the average for a detached house is under $1 million. So that's a massive chasm in $500,000 difference in price, overall average for a detached house in the city of Toronto versus W03. So very much, when we look at it compared to the city of Toronto, very much affordable for a detached house. And then same numbers go across the board for single family attached, which would be a semi-detached house. So overall average in the city of Toronto, almost 1.2 million. Whereas W03, we're looking at 950. And the thing is with W03, there's a lot of brand new semis that actually push those averages up a little bit. Townhouses, W03, 714, the city 756. So a little bit, numbers are getting a little tighter right there. But the one thing to remember with townhouses in W03, a lot of them are newer townhouses versus older townhouses. And then for condos, we're seeing 519 versus 579. Again, a little bit of difference in price. But the one thing to remember in W03 is that a lot of the condos that exist there are going to be larger condos versus the overall size average in the city of Toronto. And at the end of this podcast, we're going to get into that in just 1 minute. W04, very similar numbers to what we just talked about. $1 million for detached houses, $876 for semi. So that's actually quite a big savings over the overall average in the city of Toronto. That's it right there. Townhouses, about $100,000 less on average than the overall average in the city of Toronto. And condos, again, smaller gap. But again, like I just mentioned, generally you're finding larger condos in W04 than the average condo in the city of Toronto. And then the other under the radar neighborhood is CO3, mainly just Oakwood Village in CO3, so not the whole CO3. So numbers are going to be quite a bit higher in these neighborhoods versus the overall average in the city of Toronto. But the one thing, so if we look at CO3 and Oakwood, so Oakwood, the numbers are going to be a lot closer to the numbers in W03. But if you look at the neighboring areas to Oakwood Village, you're talking like Cedarvale, Humewood, Forest Hill, south and north. When you look into those neighborhoods and those sub-neighborhoods, the averages are quite a bit higher. So Oakwood Village is kind of on the bleeding edge of some of the priciest neighborhoods in Toronto, where there's a lot of value for people to find something affordable if you're into that like entry-level luxury product. So that's it for the under the radar neighborhoods, under the radar stats. Let's now dive into what I talked about at the start of this podcast. So this really great deep dive into condos shrinking. So I'm not going to regurgitate everything from their podcast. I'd encourage you watching to actually give this a watch, subscribe to their Substack, give it a read. But because I just made that recent video about families living in condos, and maybe I'll post some of the comments that I received online, I understand people's visceral reaction to the idea of a family living in a condo, because when people think of condos, I think quite often they think about small little 500 square foot one bedrooms, or they think of sub 1,000 square foot 3 bedrooms, right? And you think, how the heck am I supposed to fit a family of 3, 4, 5 people into a family-sized condo. So I understand that and I sympathize with people. And the work that Sabrina and Mike Moffat had done show that. I mean, they even quoted these stats from MPAC, which I'll pull up right here. If we look at this right here, the average size of houses over time, right? So when we look at detached houses, semi-detached houses, townhouses, they've actually increased over time, right? It looks like semi-detached houses are getting a little bit smaller, like that curve is starting to bend down a little bit. But for the most part, from the 70s to now, most other house types got quite a bit larger. Condos were completely different, right? So in the 70s, sizes started to creep up a little bit, slightly over 1,000 square feet, and then started dipping into the 90s. And then once we got into the 2000s, we saw condos shrink quite a bit. Now we're like just above that 500 mark. I mean, they're probably in the 600 to 700 square foot range. So understandable why people have that visceral reaction to condos. And it's something that, I mean, a lot of the people that maybe made comments and watched my whole video. It's something where I think it's really important to look at that, right? And to ask our people who create policy to address that problem. I think what happens because the condo market became so commoditized over the years and it became an investment vehicle for a lot of people rather than just a form of housing. What happened was when we were selling to investors, we kept squeezing the price per square foot, right? If we could sell a condo for a higher price per square foot and sacrifice the size, the developer made more money. It's simple as that, right? I mean, developers will give you a lot of, not excuses, but a lot of reasons why they increase the price per square foot, whether it be the cost of construction, whether it be the taxes that they had to pay, this, that, and the other thing. I'm not saying those are invalid, but while that was happening, there should have been some pushback from politicians in power to say, hey, you can't just keep crunching the size of these condos. You actually have to build a certain amount of family-sized units. And it shouldn't, we had a few of loose rules in the city of Toronto around 3 bedrooms that were kind of enforced not. But overall, it really should have been a square footage requirement that X amount of units in a lot of these new buildings should have been over 900, over 1,000 square feet to accommodate proper families into these units. Now, all that being said, there are a lot of pockets of Toronto where there are some larger units, both new and old, for families. I mean, I'm living in a almost 1,200 square foot space that was a 2-bedroom plus den that we converted to a 3-bedroom, and it's very comfortable for my family of 4. And we even have a rooftop terrace for outdoor space. And in a lot of the under-the-radar neighborhoods, if we go down St. Clair West and we look over into St. Clair West and Weston, there's a couple of new buildings there where there's a multitude of units that were built that are 2 plus den, 3-bedroom, over 1,000 square feet, under 1.1 million. And actually on that price point, let's actually look to kind of see what's currently available in the city of Toronto for a family. Because I even got a comment on TikTok. Someone was like, where am I going to find these units, right? I can't find them. I don't know where they are, which again is very valid because there's not a lot, but they do exist. So let me just put in the numbers right here. Let's look at $1 to $900,000 condo apartment. Let's look at 3 to 5 bedrooms. I mean, there's not too many condos that are 5 bedrooms, but hey, let me put it in. And then let's see what we come up with. And I want to look specifically in Toronto. And let's see what comes up. 3 to 5 bedrooms, 1 to 900,000 condo apartment. So right now, oh wait, sorry. That includes 2 plus dens. I just want to look at 3 bedrooms specifically. 3 bedrooms. 287 3 bedrooms currently on the market. And let's look at where they're located. So as I mentioned, I mean, there's some of these core neighborhoods right here. You're not going to see much, a lot of stuff in Midtown. There are a few downtown, right? So we do have a few legit 3 bedrooms downtown. Actually, one other quick revision I want to make to this criteria. Let's look at size because some of the ones downtown might not be quite large. Okay, there we go. Now let's look at the map. Okay. So we did over 900 square feet just to make sure that. So yeah. So we're looking right now. There are a few. You can look downtown near Liberty Village. We have some, right? You have some in King West. There are some on Cameron Street, so that's like Spadina and Dundas, near College and Yonge, 7 Carlton, right? So there are some that exist, but then when we come up again to some of the under the radar neighborhoods I was talking about, especially when we go over into Weston, right? There's certainly some options up in here, right? In Weston, 10 Wilby. This is actually a brand new building. I actually love this building quite a bit. The views from this building are absolutely stellar. So yeah, this is 900 plus square foot unit. Yeah, decent finishes, proper 3 bedrooms. All this is just to say that there are options out there, but there should be a lot more, right? And that's where I understand the pain points with a lot of people out there who are watching this and watching my videos is they feel, I don't know, they feel upset, they feel exasperated, they feel like there's no other options for them. But I'm going to keep doing my best to try and highlight some of these areas where you can currently find some condos, some options for families. Actually, I'm looking right here. Sorry, zooming in again. The area around Downsview, Long Wilson and Allen. So actually right near Yorkdale. So there's some options there as well. Just south end of Downsview. But anyhow, I'm going to keep trying to highlight these options and keep trying to push this idea forward that families can live in condos, can live in apartments, as long as we start building proper family-sized units. And that's the key to this whole thing, is that we need more family-sized units in the city of Toronto where people can raise their kids and enjoy nice quality of life here in the city. And it can't just be these throwaway 700 square foot 3 bedrooms that are just built for roommates and investors, because it's really tough to fit 3 bedrooms into sub 900 square feet. So hopefully some of the policy planners watch this podcast, watch my videos, and start pushing for that. We have a mayoral race coming up. Hopefully the mayors get on that train. I don't want to make any endorsements, but one of the new entrants to the mayor race, he has mentioned that his priority is families. So hopefully we see a lot more politicians start talking about that. Hopefully some of the talk around building from the federal level is building more 3-bedroom family units in major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, because that's really, really what we need. So that about wraps it up for the podcast. Thanks for watching. Don't want to have this run too long. We're sitting at about 25 minutes. And yeah, watch out for some of my new videos. My next video that's going to drop is a old versus new, where we talk about planned obsolescence. That's all I'll tell you for now. It sounds like a boring topic, but it's a really, really good video. Watch that. And remember to like and subscribe, and please share content. If you like my content, share it. Right? I'd love to get some more people to watch it. Obviously, I'd love to have more people watch my content. But more than anything, I want policy to start changing, and I want to see the city of Toronto grow the right way and include families in the discussion. So thanks again for watching. Peace out.